Throughout the long history of human civilization, countless rulers have led armies into battle, some celebrated for victories, others remembered for defeat. Yet only a select few stand apart, men who never once lost on the battlefield. Their names echo through time as symbols of courage and mastery. Let us begin our journey, starting with number 3. Number 3. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the East. Alexander the Great was born in the city of Pella in the year 356 before Christ. He was the son of King Philip, the second of Macedonia, and Queen Olympias. From the moment of his birth, Alexander was destined for greatness. His mother instilled in him a belief in divine heritage, and his father provided the foundation of a strong and ambitious kingdom. Yet it was his education that gave him the intellectual and strategic brilliance which would define his life. As a boy, Alexander was taught by none other than Aristotle, the most renowned philosopher of the age. Under Aristotle's instruction, he studied philosophy, politics, medicine, and natural sciences. But more importantly, he absorbed the spirit of Homer's epics, learning to model his life after the legendary hero Achilles. This early exposure to both knowledge and heroic ideals created a young prince whose ambition stretched far beyond the borders of Macedonia. In the year 336 before Christ, tragedy struck. King Philip II was assassinated, and at only 20 years of age, Alexander inherited the throne. Many doubted that such a young ruler could maintain control over Macedonia, let alone over the fractious Greek city-states. Yet Alexander moved with swift and ruthless efficiency. When the city of Thebes rebelled, he crushed the uprising in a matter of days, razing the city as a warning. Greece submitted, and Alexander stood unchallenged as the leader of the Hellenic world. With Greece united, his gaze turned toward the east. The Persian Empire, ruled by King Darius III, stretched across Asia and had long threatened Greek independence. Alexander declared that he would avenge the Persian invasions of the past and liberate the Greek cities under Persian rule. In the year 334 before Christ, he crossed the Hellespont with an army of 37,000 men. Compared to the immense wealth and manpower of Persia, his force was small, yet Alexander carried with him not only soldiers but also an unshakable will to conquer. His first major test came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Facing the satraps of Persia and their cavalry, Alexander boldly led his own companions' cavalry across the rushing waters, personally fighting at the front. Despite the dangers, his daring attack broke the Persian line. Victory at the Granicus secured Asia Minor and announced to the world that the Macedonian king was no ordinary commander. The next great confrontation came at Issus in the year 333 before Christ. Here, Alexander faced King Darius himself. The Persian army vastly outnumbered the Macedonians, yet the narrow coastal plain favored Alexander's tactics. With precision, he led his cavalry in a wedge formation, striking directly toward Darius. Terrified, the Persian king fled the battlefield, leaving behind his family and treasures. This victory not only gave Alexander control over the eastern Mediterranean, but also revealed his genius as a commander who could turn disadvantages into triumphs. After Issus, Alexander moved south, welcomed as a liberator in Egypt, where he founded the city of Alexandria, but his greatest challenge still lay ahead. In the year 331 before Christ, on the plains of Gaugamela, Darius gathered an immense host, possibly the largest Persian army ever assembled. Chariots armed with scythes, war elephants, and countless soldiers stretched across the horizon. Once again, Alexander was heavily outnumbered. On that fateful day, Alexander's tactics reached their peak. He advanced his right flank diagonally, drawing the Persians out of position. Then, with perfect timing, he led his companions in a sudden, devastating charge straight at Darius. The Persian king fled for the second time, and his army collapsed in chaos. Gaugamela was not only a decisive victory, but the death knell of the Persian Empire. Within months, Alexander entered Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, seizing the treasures of centuries and becoming the master of Asia. Yet Alexander's ambition was boundless. He pressed further eastward, founding cities and spreading Hellenic culture. In the year 326 before Christ, he crossed into India and faced King Porus at the Hydaspes River. The battle was unlike anything his men had seen before. War elephants thundered across the field, shaking the earth and terrifying the Macedonian soldiers. But Alexander adapted. He used his cavalry to outflank the enemy, and after a brutal struggle, emerged victorious. Admiring Porus's bravery, Alexander reinstated him as a loyal ally, showing that he valued courage even in his foes. By this point, Alexander's men had marched thousands of miles, through deserts, mountains, and monsoon rains. Exhausted and longing for home, they refused to march further east. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back, but his mind still brimmed with new plans of conquest. He dreamed of campaigns in Arabia and beyond. However, in the year 323 before Christ, at the age of only 32, he died suddenly in Babylon. The cause of his death remains a mystery, whether illness, poison, or exhaustion. Alexander never lost a single battle. From the Granicus to Issus, from Gaugamela to the Hydaspes, he triumphed every time. His empire stretched from Greece to India, the largest the world had yet seen. More enduring than his conquests was the cultural legacy of the Hellenistic world, where Greek ideas mingled with Eastern traditions, shaping art, science, and philosophy for centuries. His name became a symbol of greatness. Generals like Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte studied his campaigns, inspired by his daring and brilliance. Even though his empire fragmented after his death, his legend remained unbroken. Alexander the Great was not only a king and a conqueror, but the embodiment of human ambition and courage. A man who sought to push the boundaries of the world itself. Number 2. Genghis Khan, the storm from the steppes. Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in the year 1162, rose from the harsh steppes of Mongolia to become one of the most feared and respected conquerors in history. His life was shaped by struggle, survival, and an unrelenting drive to unite the fractured tribes of the Mongols under a single banner. What makes his story remarkable is not only the scale of his conquests, but also the fact that throughout his campaigns, he never lost a battle. The early years of Temujin were filled with hardship. When he was still a boy, his father was poisoned by enemies, leaving his family vulnerable and abandoned by their clan. Forced into a life of poverty, Temujin endured hunger, betrayal, and captivity. These experiences hardened him, instilling a relentless determination to rise above weakness. He learned that only unity and loyalty could protect his people, and with that vision, he began his journey to power. By his early adulthood, Temujin had gathered loyal followers, men who believed in his leadership. Unlike many steppe chiefs who relied solely on kinship ties, Temujin promoted men based on merit. A skilled warrior or loyal ally could rise regardless of birth. This meritocratic system became a cornerstone of his success. Slowly, he defeated rival tribes one by one, incorporating them into his growing confederation. In the year 1206, he was formally proclaimed as Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. With the tribes united, Genghis Khan turned outward, seeking to expand beyond Mongolia. His first great campaign targeted the Western Xia dynasty, a kingdom in northwestern China. The Mongols struck with ferocious speed, their cavalry sweeping across the land. The Xia rulers, unprepared for such relentless assaults, submitted to Mongol overlordship. It was the first step in a career of conquest that would shake the world. Genghis Khan's military genius lay in his mastery of mobility, discipline, and psychological warfare. The Mongol horsemen were the most skilled cavalry of their time, able to ride for days without rest, sustaining themselves with dried meat and fermented mare's milk. Each warrior carried multiple horses, ensuring endurance over vast distances. Their composite bows were powerful, capable of piercing armor at long range. But more than weapons, it was organization that made the Mongols unstoppable. The army was divided into units of tens, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands, known as tumens. Orders flowed clearly, discipline was strict, and loyalty to Genghis Khan was absolute. He demanded complete obedience, but in return he rewarded his soldiers with the spoils of war, distributing wealth more fairly than many kings of the time. This system ensured that the Mongol warriors fought not just out of duty, but out of fierce devotion. In the year 1211, Genghis Khan unleashed his might against the Jin dynasty of northern China. The campaign was brutal. The Mongols besieged cities, employed Chinese engineers to build siege engines, and adapted quickly to unfamiliar styles of warfare. Despite the vast armies of the Jin, the Mongols advanced inexorably. Their adaptability was unmatched. On the open field, Mongol cavalry annihilated larger forces with feigned retreats and encirclements. Against fortified cities, they absorbed foreign knowledge, learning to use catapults and gunpowder weapons. Step by step, the Jin dynasty crumbled before them. But the most legendary campaign of Genghis Khan came against the Khwarezmian Empire, located in Persia and Central Asia. Initially, relations were peaceful. Genghis Khan sent a caravan of merchants to establish trade. However, the Shah of Khwarezmian betrayed him, seizing the merchants and killing them. Enraged, Genghis Khan dispatched ambassadors to demand justice, but one of them was executed. This insult could not be tolerated. In the year 1217, the Mongol storm descended upon the Khwarezmian lands. The campaign that followed was a masterpiece of military strategy. The Mongols advanced in multiple columns, spreading terror and confusion. They destroyed city after city with ruthless efficiency. Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench fell in flames. At Bukhara, Genghis Khan reportedly addressed the people, declaring that he was the punishment of God for their sins. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. Entire populations surrendered out of fear, knowing that resistance meant annihilation. The Khwarezmian Shah fled westward, abandoning his people. The Mongols pursued him across deserts and mountains, never relenting. By the end of the campaign, the once great Khwarezmian Empire had been obliterated, and Central Asia lay in Mongol hands. Genghis Khan had proven that no empire, however vast or rich, could stand against his army. What made Genghis Khan truly undefeated was not just the battles he won, but the way he adapted to every challenge. Against Chinese dynasties, he mastered siege warfare. Against heavily armored Persian cavalry, he relied on mobility and deception. Against vast distances and harsh climates, he turned the resilience of the steppe into a weapon. His enemies could never predict his next move. One of his greatest tactical tools was the feigned retreat. Mongol horsemen would pretend to flee in panic, luring their opponents into a reckless pursuit. Once the enemy was stretched and disorganized, the Mongols would wheel around and strike with devastating force. Time and again, this maneuver shattered armies that believed they had gained the upper hand. Beyond the battlefield, Genghis Khan built a system of governance to sustain his empire. He codified laws, promoted trade, and established a communication network across his vast territories using mounted couriers. He respected different religions, allowing Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and others to worship freely, as long as they recognized Mongol authority. This tolerance, unusual for the time, helped stabilize his rule over diverse peoples. Yet his conquests were marked by brutality. Entire cities were destroyed if they resisted. Populations were slaughtered to serve as examples. The devastation of Central Asia was immense, leaving scars for generations. But to his followers, Genghis Khan was not a tyrant but a bringer of order, wealth, and honor. For the Mongols, he transformed their fragmented tribes into the masters of the world. By the time of his death in the year 1227, Genghis Khan's empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. He had conquered more territory than any leader before him, forging the largest land empire in history. Remarkably, in all his campaigns, from Mongolia to China, from Central Asia to Persia, he never lost a single battle. His legacy was profound. After his death, his descendants continued his conquests, reaching Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. But the foundation of that empire rested on the genius of Genghis Khan himself. To this day, his name remains both feared and revered, a symbol of unstoppable willpower and unmatched military skill. Genghis Khan was the storm that swept across continents, a man who rose from obscurity to shake the foundations of civilizations. Number 2 on our list, he stands as one of the greatest undefeated commanders in history, a leader who combined vision, discipline, and ferocity to carve an empire out of the endless steppe. Number 1. Alexander Suvorov, the undefeated general of Russia. Number 1 on our list is a man whose name is revered in Russian history as the very embodiment of military genius and unbreakable courage. Alexander Suvorov, born in the year 1729, stands alone as one of the few commanders in world history who never suffered defeat. Over the course of more than 60 battles fought against the strongest enemies of his age, he emerged victorious every single time. His career, spanning decades, turned him into a legend among soldiers and a nightmare for his adversaries. Alexander Vasilievich Suvorov was born into a noble family in Moscow. As a child, he was frail, small in stature, and often ill. Many believed that he would never be fit for military life. Yet, Suvorov himself refused to accept such limitations. He studied history, tactics, and military theory with relentless dedication. Inspired by the works of great commanders of the past, including Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, he trained his body and sharpened his mind until he overcame his physical weakness. This determination, forged in his youth, became the foundation of his greatness. Suvorov entered military service in the mid-18th century, a time when the Russian Empire was rising in power but faced fierce rivals on every side. From the Ottoman Turks in the south to the Polish Confederates in the west, from the Swedes to the mountainous terrain of the Caucasus, Russia's enemies tested her borders constantly. Suvorov quickly distinguished himself through both bravery and brilliance. He rose in rank not through privilege alone, but because his superiors recognized his unique talent for leadership and strategy. One of Suvorov's earliest significant triumphs came during the Russo-Turkish War of the year 1768 to 1774. The Ottoman Empire was a formidable adversary, boasting vast armies and centuries of military tradition. Yet, Suvorov's unconventional tactics repeatedly outmaneuvered them. At the Battle of Kozluga in the year 1774, he faced a much larger Turkish force. Using surprise and rapid maneuvers, he struck at the enemy's flanks and shattered their formations. The victory was decisive, and it secured Russia's dominance in the Balkans. What set Suvorov apart was his philosophy of war. He believed in speed, simplicity, and relentless aggression. While many generals of his time preferred cautious maneuvers and elaborate planning, Suvorov emphasized swift attacks, direct assaults, and the morale of his soldiers. His famous maxim was, "Train hard, fight easy." He drilled his men rigorously, not just in traditional formation, but in endurance, improvisation, and discipline. On campaign, he shared the hardships of his soldiers, marching alongside them, eating the same rations, and enduring the same cold and hunger. This earned him a devotion that few generals could command. During the suppression of the Polish Confederation of Bar, and later the Kosciuszko uprising in the year 1794, Suvorov demonstrated both his ruthlessness and his efficiency. At the storming of Warsaw's suburb of Praga, his troops overwhelmed the Polish defenders in a brutal assault. The victory crushed organized resistance, though it came at a terrible cost in lives. For Russians, Suvorov was a hero who secured the empire's western frontier. For Poles, his name became associated with terror. Yet from a purely military perspective, it was another flawless victory in his long record. Suvorov's greatest tests came in the later wars against the Ottoman Empire and revolutionary France. Against the Turks, he achieved his most famous triumph at the Siege of Izmail in the year 1790. The fortress of Izmail, on the Danube River, was considered impregnable. Its massive walls were defended by more than 30,000 Ottoman soldiers, supplied and armed to withstand any assault. European observers declared it impossible to take. Suvorov, however, believed otherwise. He spent days preparing his troops, drilling them in storming exercises and building scaling ladders. On the morning of the attack, he ordered an assault from all sides simultaneously. Russian columns advanced under withering fire, clambering up the walls with ladders and storming the gates. The fighting was savage, hand-to-hand within the fortress streets. Yet by the end of the day, Izmail had fallen. The Ottoman defenders were annihilated, and Russia's path into the Balkans was secure. The victory shocked Europe and cemented Suvorov's reputation as the most formidable general of his age. But Suvorov's genius was not confined to the East. In the year 1799, when revolutionary France threatened to spread its influence across Europe, Suvorov was summoned to lead the coalition forces in Italy and Switzerland. Though already in his 70s, he marched at the head of his armies with undiminished vigor. In northern Italy, he defeated French forces at the battles of Trebia and Novi, employing his trademark combination of speed and audacity. His presence alone was enough to inspire his troops and strike fear into his enemies. The Swiss campaign was perhaps his most legendary achievement. Ordered to lead his army across the treacherous Alps to confront the French, Suvorov faced impossible conditions. The mountains were steep, the passes narrow, and the weather merciless. Yet he drove his soldiers forward, refusing to surrender or retreat. At the Battle of the Devil's Bridge in September of the year 1799, his troops fought French forces while crossing a narrow bridge over a raging gorge. Against all odds, they broke through. Though exhausted and surrounded by danger, Suvorov's leadership carried them to safety. It was one of the most extraordinary feats of endurance and command in military history. What made Suvorov unique was not only his unbroken string of victories, but his deep understanding of both strategy and humanity. He treated his soldiers as comrades, not merely pawns. He was known for his eccentric personality, often dressing simply, speaking plainly, and defying aristocratic norms. Yet in battle he was ruthless, uncompromising, and utterly determined to win. He believed that war should be swift and decisive, for long campaigns only brought suffering. This philosophy, combined with his genius, made him a master of lightning warfare long before the modern age. Over his lifetime, Alexander Suvorov fought more than 60 battles and never lost. He defeated Turks, Poles, Frenchmen, and countless others, always adapting his tactics to the situation. He mastered open-field battles, sieges, river crossings, and mountain warfare. No enemy could break him, no terrain could halt him, and no challenge could overwhelm his spirit. His record remains one of the most astonishing in the annals of military history. Suvorov died in the year 1800 in St. Petersburg. His funeral was attended by thousands, from soldiers who had marched at his side to nobles who admired his service to Russia. On his tombstone was inscribed a simple epitaph that captured his essence. "Here lies Suvorov." No grand titles were needed. His name alone was enough to convey greatness. Today, Alexander Suvorov is remembered as the undefeated general, a symbol of discipline, courage, and the art of war. His teachings influenced later generations of commanders, and his legacy lives on in military academies and in the hearts of those who value the rare combination of brilliance and humanity in leadership. As number one on our list, he stands above even the greatest conquerors of antiquity, for his life proved that true mastery of war lies not only in victory, but in never knowing defeat.